Good. All
All
righty.
right. So today I'm very excited to announce that we have Deirdre Shabano here to teach us a little bit about portraiture. I took a class from her right after the pandemic started. So I think it was one of your first Zoom classes. It was on portraiture, but it was very good. I'm not very good at portraits, so I learned a lot. So I really appreciated that class. You have a very good teaching style. It was very easy to follow along. So I figured this would be great. You guys are going to enjoy this. So that's my intro for you. Take it away.
All right, great, great. Well, hi, hello, everybody. The good news is that my classes and my Zoom tech abilities have definitely progressed since when you took a class. So hopefully you'll see that. So I'm going to go right into the exercise here. And let me give you a little bit of my background in terms of um, different methods that I've been through. I actually started at the Art Students League in New York City when I was 15, actually 14 years old. And in those days, of course, that was 100 years ago, and everybody just kind of, threw the paint around and hoped for the best. You walk into the studio and like, hey, there's a model, well, go for it. It's like, oh, okay. So spend time doing that and realize that's not going anywhere. And I did go somewhere. I mean, you learn stuff, obviously, but and then I've also been to the Academy in San Francisco. I've been in Cooper Union in New York, and I've been through atelier systems, which are very, very strict, rigid, classical approach to drawing and painting. I mentioned that just briefly a few minutes ago. It's where you literally stand with your arm extended, holding plumb lines, and it's amazing. It works. And anyway, the reason I'm bringing that up is I've kind of developed a system based on that, but not so painful. So you don't have to stand and hold a plumb line for 3, 4, 5 hours. But anyway, so I'm going to just move right into it. And John, you're going to help me out if there's questions.
Yes. I'll be keeping an eye on chat, and I'll let you know if somebody has questions. So if you do have a question or a comment, just put it in chat, and I'll give you a heads up that there's something in the chat.
Okay. Yeah. And then to be honest with you, since I am a control freak, let's wait till there's a bunch of questions and then throw them at me.
Sure.
So I don't have to stop and go like, how that is. Okay. All right. Okay, here we go. Woohoo. Okay. So I did have this sent to you, which is a kind of an interesting relationship between Leonardo da Vinci here over on the left and what the system that I've kind of developed on the right. Sorry, a little interruption there. So let me just take Leo and bring him over here. I call him Leo because I talk about him so much. He's now my friend. I feel like I own part of him. So I want to talk about this. It's like amazing if you think about it. The most difficult thing you can draw or paint by far is the human portrait. And the reason that that's so is that we are raised to, from the day we're born, we're looking at faces and features and shadow shapes on a face and expressions and all of that. So it's hard to be too loose with a portrait unless you're intentionally being loose. But if you're trying to get some kind of resemblance to your model, you have to have some method to do it. It's just not, in my experience, I've been drawing and painting a really long time. It's not enough to just kind of go, oh yeah, it's kind of like that, or maybe it's like this. So anyway, I'm bringing up good old Leonardo over here. Obviously, in checking out some of these are what the atelier would call plumb lines, actually. And there's, let me write down, there's another person, I mentioned it in the text here. What's taught in the art schools today is basically the Loomis method, which was from an illustrator of about 1940 or so, and Leonardo da Vinci's method still persists basically and crosses over into the more contemporary methods of portrait drawing, portrait painting. Okay, so let's take a look at him. The Loomis method says that the head is divided in thirds. Let me take good old Leo's portrait there. We have 1/3 here from the hairline. And even if the person's bald, you can see where the hairline was. To the brow bone, another dimension is from the brow bone to the septum, bottom of the nose. Now, this is where things get a little different. This has to do with actually the period of time. Usually, and you'll see it in more modern pictures or contemporary images, the next third is equal. So I have 1/3 here. You can use calipers. I just use my fingers. I have 1/3 here going from the hairline to the brow bone, 1/3 from the brow bone to the septum, and 1/3 from the septum down to the bottom of the chin. Okay, so now check this out. This is so fascinating to me. Here's my last third. 1/3, 2/3, 3/3. Do check out the Loomis method too. Okay, so I'm dividing this gentleman in thirds. Now, what's going on over here? This is, well, to go historically speaking, Leonardo da Vinci, as you probably know, or if you don't know, you weren't really allowed to draw or paint females from life in those days, right? And he was hired by the church actually to exhume bodies and to, what's a fancy word for cutting them up? Anyway, and to really analyze the structure of the skeletal structure of the muscular.
Autopsy, maybe it was what you're looking for.
Or dissecting.
Dissecting, thank you. Yes. So he basically, cutting up sounds terrible, but it's kind of what he did. So here, most of his people that he drew, and if you look at Leonardo da Vinci's drawings, they're mostly of older people, and this is what I'm talking about right in here. In those days, take note, they didn't have dentistry, all right? So right here, when I see this small of a distance from the bottom of the nose to the opening of the mouth, is probably because he either doesn't have any teeth left or they're kind of worn down. So this measurement's a little bit different in Leonardo da Vinci versus this, which is more contemporary, the Loomis method. I just wanted to give a background of this because this is really the foundation of where it comes from. Let me talk about a couple other things that Leonardo da Vinci did that's still used today. Outside of the nasal flap, if I do a plumb line straight up, I'm going to find the inside corner of the eye. And I use that today, most artists do. What about the opening of the mouth? Apparently, from the inside of the iris, if I do a plumb line down, I should be intersecting into the opening of the mouth. So these methods are useful. Now, there's a whole issue with what happens when the head turns. These angles still work, but they obviously change from going vertical to slanting either 40 or 50 degrees right or left, depending on the angle of the head. Okay, anyway, I don't get too much into this, but this relationship still occurs here outside the nasal flap, very important. And the brow bone, bottom of the septum, and bottom of the head. And again, if he had more teeth, this chin would probably be a little bit lower just to where we see the flesh turning. Now, I hope I haven't scared you. Let's take over my other friend here. Okay, now this is actually a sketch of a plaster head that I used and still use sometimes for introductory drawing so that we can have something that doesn't move. And the plaster head doesn't really have any features. It's pretty much white on white. And so I'm going to do the same thing and see if he falls more into the Loomis method. Okay, now we know there's a little swoop over here of his hair. His hairline's probably about there. And yes, that is an assumption. Let's see, I'm going to use you. Somebody's asked me about using a pencil. You're right. A lot of people use this method here. I just use my fingers, but my feeling is whatever works. Some people use calipers. Okay. All right. Hairline to the brow bone to the bottom of the nose to the bottom of the chin. So he's, you know, he's got teeth. And so this is very proportionate. Now, is that an assumption that all people have that measurement? Yes. Is an assumption that people have oval faces? Yes. Is that wrong? Yes. There are so many different types of faces, shapes of faces, square jaws, pointy jaws, long chins, et cetera, most of it is actually regulated by this area down here in the face. Now, is that important to know as an artist? In a way, yes, because you want to look at your model and you want to look at their face and get some idea, is this in thirds? So you have something to hang your artistic hat on. Or am I seeing the forehead is really small, kind of the same as the nose? Maybe he's got a really long face over here. Maybe it's long, maybe it's pointy, et cetera, et cetera. Or maybe it's square jaw coming out here. So when you're looking at a model, whether it's a photograph or from the real world, you really do want to look at that right away and get an idea. What is it that you're looking at? Excuse me while I adjust my light a little bit. It's getting too dark here. There it goes. Better. Oh, mucho better. Okay, great. Okay, so if you are drawing along with me, I think this would be a good time to start. John, I have about an hour. Is that correct?
Yep.
Okay. So believe it or not, I'm actually going to try to do a straight on and a semi-profile just to torture myself. Okay. But I don't want to get too fast. Let's see if I can. My classes are usually 2.5 hours long. But I go really slow in my class and explain everything. So I'm going to move quite a bit faster than that, but I'm hopefully going to explain, and John's going to give you a video so that you can go back and take a look at it as well. Okay, there's a series of things that we usually start with. Okay, first thing, and I'm going to write it hopefully over here where you can see. No, I'll write it down here. We're going to start with proportions, which is what I just did. Proportions is he in thirds, is his lower part of his face longer, et cetera, et cetera. So I have proportions is number 1. Number 2 is feature placement. And I know that sounds kind of bizarre. Well, we know where everything is, but you'd be surprised. Features are different on different people. And they're placed differently, ever so subtly on the face. So features is number 2, and that's where these angles come into play. From the tip of the nose to the outside corner of the eye. Tip of the nose, outside corner of the mouth. That's telling me, giving me some guideline. How big is that mouth? How wide is that mouth? How wide is the distance between the inside corner of the eye and the outside corner of the eye? So much to think about. You'll never get bored. Okay, number 3 is the value pattern. And value pattern, make sure you can still see that. Yep. Value pattern is basically light and dark. Okay, and light and dark is what makes up all form. Okay, without light and gradation of shadow going into the darkest shadow, I have no form. Over here, it feels flat because there's not much shadow going on, not much value change. Over here, I start to see, aha, there's his cheekbone, there's the cheek pad coming down to the side plane of the face. All of this is identified because of value, putting the shadow in the right place. Okay, are you ready? This is going to be pretty fast. Let's just, and it's going to be pretty generic. I'm just going to use these measurements. I might even turn him into a girl. I'm not quite sure yet. The thing that's interesting about this, usually when we do it, I actually have students put tracing paper over the picture, and it's not so I can trace that and put it on here. It's really just to preserve the drawing underneath, or we usually use, you know, real people's faces, not this kind of thing. So this is actually vellum. It's not really tracing paper. The vellum is used to protect the original image. So just to note that. But since he's already kind of graded out for you, I'm just going to run ahead here. And here's the deal, which I think is so fascinating. Yes, he's divided in 3, but that does not dictate how big my image has to be. So I can take these thirds and I can make them much bigger, 1/3 here, 2/3 there, 3/3 there. Pretty much takes me down to the end of your picture. I'm gonna go a little bit higher, and I think I'm gonna do that. So here we go. 1/3.
All right.
Random, 2/3.
Welcome to our Facebook Live event.
Oh, what's going on?
I have no idea. Okay, so here's my thirds. 1/3, a little higher. You can kind of feel it after a while. 2/3, 3/3. Okay. Now another thing that we have to do, and I hate to make this complicated, but all these things matter. Just as Leonardo da Vinci has a midline going down the center of his face. Now this head is straight forward, which, to tell you the truth, is unusual in a live studio, right? Because very seldom will you get to sit exactly in front of the model. But this is theory, so here we go. So I'm going to take his head and have it straight forward. Maybe it's a little smaller so it fits on your screen. And just take my line straight down the center. I have to keep checking, make sure what you see. 1, 2, and 3. Okay, and you can still see the top of that? Yes, okay, great. Okay, so this is the brow bone. And if I had a live person, or if I'm drawing from a photograph, I would use my pencil to see the angle of the brow bone. Well, in this particular instance, it's pretty much straight across. There's no tilt in the head, it's very simple. Underneath the nose, very simple, straight across. Mouth, straight across, chin. Okay, so it's very basic, very simple. Now, don't get too attached to these marks because they're going to change, they're going to disappear. Okay, there is now the big question, which is actually super important. Where are the eyes? This is the Loomis method, and Da Vinci does it too. Tells me that the brow bone is 1/3, 1/3, 2/3, 3/3. But I need to know where the eye is. Where is the eye center? One other note, okay? If I'm going by Loomis, this might be his hairline, right? And then his head's a little bit higher, which we had originally. Halfway down, this is Leonardo da Vinci, and Loomis actually agrees with Leonardo da Vinci on this. Halfway down the head, from the top of the actual cranium, find a halfway point. You might have to adjust your fingers. That's why I like using your fingers. It's easier to adjust than a, whoops, they're a little bit higher. It's easier to adjust than a tool. One here, oh, a little more adjustment. And you have a memory in your hand, a little bit higher, a little bit more. You can kind of feel it in your hand where when you're using tools, it's harder to feel. That's pretty close. Okay, so I'm going to go right about here. Now here goes the Atelier system. Okay, only without the plumb lines. You can simply use your pencil or your charcoal. If this is the center point of his eyes, and I'm looking at my model over here, it looks like the center point of his eye is pretty much equal to the top of his bridge. So this is the center point of the eye, and I'm not in the exact same place quite yet. I have a little bit of a curve up into the bridge, just a little bit higher. I'm just going to just put this in here for now. This is not measured yet, just kind of getting my first shot in there, okay? Okay. Then I am going to already go into the angles of the top of the nose. Now again, he's facing straight forward, so it's relatively easy. I'm going to go from the center point of, let's go over here to him first, the center point of his bridge, and I'm going to find the angle out to the nasal flap on the left. Now, what's interesting about angles is that it doesn't matter the distance. The angle works, whether it's small distance here or a larger distance there. It could even be much larger, it just depends. But the angle works from the center point of the bridge out to the outside of the nasal flap, finding my first angle out. Same thing on the other side, center of the bridge, outside of the nasal flap. And I will tell you, I do this often. I don't settle for the first go around. Here we go, over here. Going over here again. A little bit tinier in there. The one thing that's great about charcoal is it's so easy to move. The bad thing that's about charcoal is that it moves too easily. So you have that dilemma, it just flies off your paper. Okay, if my, let's say, let me get these angles here, the nostril cavity, they're kind of angling in, pretty simple angle. Bottom plane of the nose. I'm going from the septum to the angle of the nasal flap. So it's angling up. That'll work. The septum, remember we have a nice ball of cartilage here. You can just put that in here just to remind you not to squish it out. Everybody's ball of cartilage is going to be slightly different. You need to note that. All righty. Now I'm going to go back here and see if I can get the top plane of the nose. Why am I focusing on the nose? The nose is going to be the landmark for all the other features on his face. And it could be a her face, and it might turn into a her, we'll see. I had the outside of the nasal flap over here. Now I'm looking at the bridge to the right side of the top plane of the nose. You have to stare at your paper, see it, make a mark, and don't get attached to it because it may change. You'll have to go back and measure it a few times. Other side, top of the bridge, outside, really looking at the outside of the cartilage on the left. Okay, that'll work. Oh, now I'm going to attach this, take a brave moment here and attach these lines. And there's more measuring to do. Okay, so I'm going to take a little eraser here and note that this is the center point of the cartilage right up there. I'm going to put kind of a ball of cartilage. The one thing that I see people do a lot is, and it's hard to, let me just say, be positive about here, is that this is the top plane of the nose. See if I should get any closer. I think you can see that okay. This here, the septum going down into the muzzle, is the bottom plane of the nose. So this, I'm going to over exaggerate it, has shadow on it. It's not the same value as the top of the nose. So here's the top of his nose. There is the top of his bridge, et cetera, but I'm going to keep this an exaggerated shadow for now. I'm going to go back to the septum and see if I can note the bottom of the nasal flap again. So I'm using my charcoal, you can use a pencil, whatever it is you have in your hand, to use it as a way to measure the angle. I'm going to clean that up a little bit more, okay? So I don't have the nasal flaps, I just have the angles. Are they correct? Believe me, I'll go back and check. Okay, why am I doing this? Who cares? I'm going to go back to Leonardo da Vinci right here, and he's right about this. The outside of the nasal flap, if I run a plumb line straight up or straight down, however you want to think about it, plumb lines really hang down, but from the outside of the nasal flap going almost perfectly vertically is going to give me the inside corner of his eye. And that is really important. Outside of the nasal flap, inside corner of the eye. Now I'm eyeballing this, keeping my eye focused on here. I'm going to go up a little bit more, and I'm going to make a little dot there. I also use Q-tips, by the way, to get rid of stuff rather than my fingers. In theory, you're not supposed to use your fingers on charcoal because there's oil in your fingers, but that's another class right there. Okay. Okay, other side. Outside of the nasal flap, inside corner of the eye. On the left side, we can see that the inside corner of the eye is kind of shielded in the shadow. A beautiful shadow, by the way. Outside corner of the nasal flap, inside corner of the eye. Almost seems like there's a slight angle in. And that's going to come up, obviously a little higher. Okay, again, I'm just going to use my Q-tip to get rid of some of this extra information. Okay, this to me is one of the most interesting things because so often we see that people put the inside corner of the eye too close to the bridge of the nose. There's space on the inside corner of the eye and the outside of the nose. So I'm going to keep going here. I'm at the top of the bridge. Remember, this is going to be quite a bit bigger than this drawing here. There's a slight angle up. This is called the glabella here. Slight angle up into the brow. Slight angle up, not too much actually. Let's see the other side, very soft angle. And everybody's different, so you really do have to measure this. Some people have really wide angles here. Some people have kind of compressed angles there. So you do want to measure that. Okie panokies. All righty. I'm going to go back to his nose because it's such a cute nose. And I'm going to go back in here and I'm going to overdo marking the cartilage at the end of his nose. And I think I may have to change the angle of my camera. No, it's okay. Okay. And I'm going to take a little liberty, and from the top of the cartilage, I'm just angling down into the nasal flap, coming around, coming in. Same thing on the other side, pretty simple, coming in. And, you know, we don't really look at nostril cavities that much, but remember that the skin, some people call this the wing. I call it a nasal flap. I don't know how I started calling it that. Everybody has a different name for it. There's medical names, which I'm not using. And either way, remember that that skin wraps around the nasal cavity, okay? It doesn't just stop. Okay, so boom, there goes that. All righty. Okay, now my nose, or his nose, I should say, is going to be, as I said before, the landmark to find everything else on his face. So here we go. I'm going to actually use the tip of his nose, and I'm going to find the angle from the tip of his nose to the outside corner of the eye. So I do have to hold my arm still, let it settle in there, and bring that angle right back. Over here, right back to my drawing. And I do double check this, sometimes I triple check it. Okay. So here was my line, and here's my angle, telling me where the outside of that eyeball is. Other side, same thing. Tip of the nose, outside angle of the eye on the left. Okay, that'll work. I'm going to use this to find the outside corners of the mouth. Now, there's two different theories here. Leonardo da Vinci believes that the mouth is halfway down from the muzzle to the bottom of the chin. Loomis believes the opening of the mouth is in thirds. Let's see what this young man has. Let's see if he's in thirds. You have one here, two here. He looks like thirds. He's a Loomis guy. So it looks like the opening of his mouth is in thirds, going from the bottom of the septum. I'm going to divide this into thirds. Oop, a little higher. So in theory, and we'll see if this is correct, this should be the opening of the mouth. How wide is the mouth? Cannot make this up either. And again, you can use this with the head turning to the side. Tip of the nose, outside corner of the mouth on the right. Tip of the nose, outside corner of the mouth on the left. Okay, we're going to leave that there for now. There's so many things that I will adjust as I go along, but this is a basic start. Okay, so I have this angle here. Oh, it makes it look like his mouth is really wide, but I guess it is. He might be having a little bit of a smile there, which of course extends the muscles, etc. Okay. No, this is not the bottom of the bottom lip. This is just the opening of the mouth. This is just a measurement in thirds. Let's get the bottom of the lip. If I'm looking at thirds over here, the bottom of the lip is about halfway up in that space right there. So I'm going to mark this. The reason I feel anyway that this is important is that we always, and I shouldn't say always, it depends on the person's teeth. How wide, not how forward are the bottom teeth? A lot of times you'll have the lip that protrudes forward on the bottom of the mouth and it casts a little shadow, which I personally love. And so I'm going to put that in here right away. Okay, so believe it or not, I'm starting to see a human being here. Now, there's some stuff that I have added to this procedure, and I'm going to go right into it. Over the last few months, I'm going to go from the outside corner of the mouth, and I want to find, let me see if I can use chalk so you can see it. Outside corner of the mouth, I want to go down to the outside of the chin structurally. The chin's kind of like a box, so to speak. Can you see that? Okay, yes, you can. So I'm going to use this and this to come down. Same thing. Just give me an idea where the chin is. How wide is the chin? Why do I want to do that? Because from there, I want to find the angles of the jaw. So I'm using all these angles so I'm not guessing wildly. Here we go. From the chin up to the jaw. Now I know there's a curve there, but I'm going to keep it straight. If you're in the Atelier system, no curves are allowed. Everything is a straight angle, which can be pretty frustrating, but that's how they teach it, and there's a reason for it. It's easier to measure straight lines than curves. So here we go. Here's my angle. Keep it light, don't get too attached to it because it'll probably change. Other side, angle. Now I'm going to go back. I see a big difference there. This part's okay. This part is lower. Okay, it actually is lower. Okay, now where does this angle change? I'm going to use the tip of the nose to find out where does this angle change. I'm going to use chalk on the reference. I'm looking for this area right here. Where does this angle change into the side plane of his head? Tip of the nose, where does that angle change? That makes sense because it was awfully wide jaw there for a second. Tip of the nose right into, there, I'll double check on that. Tip of the nose, angle into the jaw changing. Okay. Alrighty, let's try the other side. Should be, of course, relatively the same, but one never knows. Because sometimes I'm, with humans, like real humans, things are different. Okay. Now, when you do this with a live model, you're probably thinking, oh my God, are you kidding me? How do you do this with a live model? After a while, you get to do it so quickly, it's just not that laborious. At this point, I know it is pretty laborious. I'm going to go from these other angles outside the nasal flap, find that angle coming down, nasolabial fold. I can never say that correctly. Other side. Why is this important? It's starting to give me the structure of his face. There's all these plane changes on his face, curving into his mouth over here, curving down to his mouth over there, et cetera, et cetera. I still feel like this is a little, yep, it is a little off right there. That angle's a little higher. Okie dokies. All righty. Phew. Okay, now we said that the angle is changing. I'm going to double, triple check right there where the jaw is. That's a yes, but I still need to know what's happening on the side plane. Going out to the cheekbone in front of the ear. I'm going to just mark it here. Other side. The good thing working from photographs, and I was always pre-pandemic dead set against drawing from photographs, but I'll tell you, in reality, you can learn so much. First of all, your model doesn't move. That's rewarding. And you can really dissect it. You can really really have time to figure it out. Sorry there. All righty. Now, I'm going to use the corner of his mouth to find the shadow shape under his cheekbone on the left. Shadow shape is not much shadow shape, but I do have some markings on the right under his cheekbone. Even in the light side of his face, I still need to be able to identify the plane changes. All righty. Phew. Are you guys still with me, I hope? Okay. A lot of work. Okay, so a lot of people don't do portrait drawing. It's like so much work. Okay, here we go. Inside corner of the eye, outside corner of the eye on this wonderful cooperative model is pretty much straight across. So that's easy. Other side as well. That's easy. Just going to mark that in here. Now what's important that people forget, I'm going to clean this up a little bit, is that yes, there's the eyeball, that's lovely, but when we draw, we have to note the eye socket. It's not enough to note the eyeball because, not that we think about this too much, but the eyeball is set back in the eye socket. So it's a different value. So let's see if we can find out where the bottom of his eye socket is. And it is, even on Leonardo da Vinci, it's usually about halfway down the bridge, which in his case is true. Halfway down the bridge, right about here, which is important to note because you don't think of the eye going down that far. But if you look at skeletons, right, you notice that there's the eyeball and then the eye socket, which is much lower. Okay. Now I'm going to actually just do a little bit more here and then I'm going to stop and see what questions you have. Let's get some of the basic information in here. I have the inside corner of the eye. This is important too. Top of the bridge related to the inside corner of the eye. This is another mistake a lot of us make. Top of the bridge, let me highlight that with chalk. That's where the plane changes from the top of the bridge on the sinus bone, which is what you're born with. And then you have this plane, this vertical plane really between the eyebrows, which we call the glabella. And I may say that incorrectly. Somebody said it's not quite pronounced that way. It's like, okay. And I want to find out the top of the bridge, the inside corner of the eye looks like it's straight across, which is unusual. Usually it's down a little bit further. Okay. So I have top of the bridge over here. By that note, I'm having top of the bridge and I'm having the inside corner of the eye starting right about here, which is actually kind of unusual. I'm going to put the brow right over there. It's a little bit nebulous for now. We mark the outside corner of the eye. Let me double check that again. It's going about here. Now I'm going to do what needs to be done. This entire thing, be careful, it is in a different value. The eyeball is in the eye socket, so it goes back in space. Be careful not to get too close to the bridge of the nose. So right now I'm going to put him in some sunglasses. Same thing on the other side. On the other side, you can see the shadow is much more intense, much deeper. I'm going to put it all into a light shadow. Now I know how they came up with the image of Superman. It's kind of scary looking. Maybe that was Batman. Okay, here's the end of that eye. Okay, now I'm going to make, I love his nose. I'm going to make it a little fancier. This is just straight line, straight line. We have the sinus bone, which on him is pretty strongly identified. So I'm going to make a circle there. I'm going to overdo it. Then it's coming in a little bit. Then it's going out into the cartilage and then going down into the septum, into the bottom plane of the nose, all of that. I think it's really quite cool looking. Next thing I want to do, I want to get the basic structure. Let's get his philtrum underneath the septum right in here is the philtrum. Now, before I get too caught up in the philtrum, I want to at least note the angle from the corner of the mouth up on the top lip. Corner of the mouth up on the top lip on the left. To tell you the truth, I never used to do this. You know, everybody just kind of makes up the shape of the lips, but it is important because just as people's eyes are different, their mouth shape, their lip shape is different. So it is actually important to get as close as possible. Outside of the mouth, angle to the bottom lip. Outside of the mouth, angle to the bottom lip on the left. Could we make him happier by turning up the ends of his mouth? Yes, we could. Right now, maybe not. Okay. I'm kind of getting, this looks okay here. What am I forgetting? The guy has no ears. Here's another. Leonardo da Vinci is right on about this. Bottom of the nose is usually the bottom of the ear. If the head is looking straight at us, both Loomis and Leonardo da Vinci agree on that. And then from the brow bone on top is usually the top of the ear. It slants down just a little bit, but you can actually find that on your model to find out how much it slants down. Now we have cranium's going to start in here. Let's get these ears. We would call, what do we usually call that? The temple, right? Let's get these ears just marked in here for sure. Top of the ear. Now his ears are a little lower. Of course, then there's the question of, as people get older, their ears, the bottom part of the ear does tend to grow, or I don't know. We're not going to talk about age. Okay. We're going to pass on that one. I just always had this great story though. I had an uncle whose ears were so big. And as a kid, I used to look at him and go, why is his ear so big? And the whole lobe area was just hanging down there. Well, we're not going to get into all that. Okay. Okay, so he's got some indication of where his ears are. Let's keep going with a little bit more information. This is something artists always forget about. Look at the whole cranium goes way out here. Let's go from in front of his ear to find the angle out. And I'm just going to assume it's the same thing on the other side. Where does it start turning in? I'm going to use the top of the nose to see where that angle changes. It's going to start changing right about here. And I know we have hair, and I didn't really put that in there yet. I'm going to give a little bit of that information now. Pretty simple. He has a kind of a John Kennedy hairdo there. Where's John Kennedy when you need him? Okay. Now, something I didn't do in the beginning, I'll do in a minute, but right now I'm going to just see how people are doing. If you want to share or if you want to ask questions, that's all good. Let's get this up a little bit higher. It's got a lot of, like I said, kind of like that old-fashioned Kennedy hairdo, but I guess I'm telling you my age when I say that. Let's see, bottom of the jaw, usually pretty much a vertical line down on each side. Oops, goes right under that ear, unless you're a football player and you've worked out that muscle in your neck. So it's super wide. It usually is a pretty much a, well, this goes in, a vertical line. All right, we think we have a human here. Let me take a, I have no idea what time. My gosh, is it 6 to 7? Oh, and to think I was going to do a whole semi-profile here. I guess not. Okay, let me take some questions, please. And just a little bit, if you have any questions before I go into the shadow shape. And I know I'm talking really fast, which I don't do when I teach, but I'm trying to squeeze in as much information as possible. So John, have any questions?
So we don't have any on chat.
No?
Do you mind if I ask a question? I was writing it in chat and then it disappeared and I didn't feel like writing it over.
I know the feeling.
I've taken some portrait drawing classes and this is fascinating to me. I've had a couple of rules of thumb thrown out that the width of the width of the eye area is 4 eyes across or something like that.
Yeah. It's usually 3 eyes across, but that's why I've gone to using angles to find things, and that's true. They said that this is 3 eyes across, right? So there's one here, one in the middle, one there, 3 eyes across, and then there's another eye over here, and sometimes another eye over there. But that's not true for everybody. That's a nice.
I can believe it. Yes.
Yeah. Some people have really beautiful, I'm like in love with faces. Some people have these beautiful wide cheekbones up here, you know, and their eyes are more narrow. So I think that that's a good theory, but everybody's face is so amazingly different. And to kind of get closer to what they have is really the challenge, you know, especially just you know, I mean, the beauty of our country is that we have so much diversity. So you can like get on a bus and look around. It's like so many different faces and shapes and, you know,
right.
Fantastic. So these angles seem maybe kind of laborious, but it gives you a map that's, I think, more accurate than, but I hear what you're saying. I learned it.
No, I would think it's more accurate too, because you rarely see a face that is symmetrical.
Yes, correct.
You know, if you put a line down the middle, it's shocking how different each side of the face on most people is. So this would work out better.
Yeah, it does. And once the head starts turning, as I said, the most common thing you'll see is a semi-profile. If you guys ever want me to come back, I'll do that for you. But a semi-profile is what you'll usually see in a life drawing, you know, class. And actually very much in even most photographs. Very rarely do you have somebody who's like, boom, straight in front of you. You know, so these angles work for semi-profiles as well, and profiles. These angles work for everything, and so I get pretty excited about it. Any other questions before we move right in? I'm going to do some shadow shapes.
Yeah, Deirdre, we have a question on chat from Jan.
Yes.
Says, I had a teacher who made me make the 2 eyes look different from each other. Any opinion?
I don't, well, I have no idea why she would do that. It depends if the head is turning at all, even slight semi-profile, then the eyes are going to have a different width, right? Because as the head turns, let me drag this girl up here. I was going to do this, but I didn't realize how little time we really have. So let's take a look at her for a second. Once the head starts turning in a semi-profile, this eye over here is much more compressed. We call it foreshortened, right? And so this distance is shorter and this is much longer. So we have a wider view of the face on one side, and everything will follow that suit. That the eye is wider, the nasal flap is wider on the right, the mouth is wider on the right, et cetera, et cetera. So that might be what she was talking about. The only time where you would have the eyes absolutely as close to proximity as possible would be an absolutely straight on view.
I think it had something to do with what Sharon was saying about that no face is symmetrical, because it was a straight on portrait.
Huh.
It wasn't sideways, yeah. So
yeah, I mean that is true. You know, then all of this, of course, is theory, and I think that's what's important with all theory. It's something that you can hang your hat on. But when you have a real person in front of you, just as all theory has to bend when you get close to reality, right? So yeah, I mean, it could be different. I'm not an optometrist, so I don't know. I've heard that before, but I guess our job really as artists, especially portrait artists, is to paint what we see, and that's hard to do. I've done lots of commission portraits, and I've seen all sorts of interesting eyes. Ironically, I get a lot of older men, which is kind of funny that maybe, I don't know, if the families decide they want a portrait of, you know, their father, grandfather. So, you know, with age too, not that we need to talk about age, heaven forbid, but those, our eyes change a lot, right? Because the muscles start dropping, and so the lids drop. Recently did a painting of a man who just recently passed away, actually. And, you know, his eyes were very different because of age, right? And so that, yes, we have to, of course, take into account.
Deidre, we have one more question. Do the angles change with ethnicity?
Well, well, basically everybody's structure, if I took their skin off, right, and I took their muscles off, and I look at just a skeleton, basically the structure is the same. What is changing, of course, you're thinking, okay, maybe African American people have wider noses. That's true basically, but the actual bone underneath, the sinus bone, the end of the bone, the cartilage might be different, might be wider. I think for maybe some Asian people, I always find that this right here is a little wider. And boy, I really recommend that you, so fascinating to study why our faces, why different cultures' faces have developed the way they have. I am totally obsessed with it. It is so fascinating, and it's mostly about weather. All about weather. It's about weather, about how much moisture is in the air, how long their noses are, the lids, why are some lids heavier, and I assume light reflection from the snow. Do read about it. I can go on for a half hour. It's so fascinating. So if you really, and it's hard to find, I actually don't have a book, I've just researched it online, why people, different cultures have different features. And it really pretty much went back to I hate to say original, but, you know, going back thousands upon thousands of years, the environment with which they existed. So fascinating. I wish the world would read that, because it would certainly take care of a lot of racism in our world, for sure. But I'm not going to get political today. I'll just keep my mouth shut. Okay. Hard.
I have one more question.
Sure.
Have you seen this guy on YouTube who sits in the subway on his way home from work and does portraits of people?
Oh no.
Totally unknown to them, and then when he finishes, he gives it to them, and they are so surprised and so thrilled and happy.
Wow.
And I'm wondering if you have ever done anything like that.
I actually did when I was in art school, when I was at the Art Students League in New York. I used to go down the street on 57th Street, and I know this is ancient, it doesn't even exist, you know, Horn and Hard Art, which was like a restaurant where you would go, you put a nickel in, and you get a cup of coffee. I don't know, anyway, anyway, in New York City, they had these. And so a lot of older people would go there and just hang out there all day long. And I was like a teenager, and they were like my perfect models, because they would just sit there, you know? And,
right.
And so I would just go and draw them all day as like studies, and they didn't even notice. I didn't really give them any, you know, the drawings. I didn't want to get yelled at. So I didn't do it. But yeah, it's fascinating if you can get away with it. It's kind of hard to do these days. Most people are like, what are you doing? You know?
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, you know, I'm sure you can find it on YouTube if you check it out. It's very interesting, and
definitely
he's become very famous because of it.
That's great. I love that idea. Okay, so do I have a few more minutes, John? So I want
Yeah.
to do
Yep.
my shadow shapes. Okay, so the next thing is actually really important, and it seems very, very kind of trivial for people when they've been drawing a long time. It's this. Let's see if I can do it down here. Okay, this. Let me see. His shadows on his left side. This right here is what drawing is all about. Right there. Now we're going to put a cast shadow. My cast shadow, my core shadow. Cast shadow is the darkest shadow, core shadow. And then I have a little bit of a mid-tone. Barely see it. And then I have light. Now you can't see the top of the circle, but your eye can make a circle, right? It starts to make a circle because our brain knows that this looks like the beginning of a sphere. Now, if your viewer can't see the circle, then you can put a background behind it. This is a really good little exercise. And all of a sudden, you can see it, not because you've drawn a circle around the circle, but because you've drawn a contrast value behind the circle. Now I just flattened out his top. Sorry about that old circle there. Let me put his top back on. So by doing that, you can see there's kind of a sphere sitting on a table with a background. Now I didn't finish it. This is what portrait drawing is all about. Cast shadow, core shadow, a little bit of mid-tone, and light and highlight, which would actually go right about there. Okay, I'm gonna do super quick. Okay, shadow on this gentleman's face is the same as over here. It's on the left side. I'm gonna come into my darkest dark right up here. Side plane of the nose, a little lighter. This is core shadow. Have a little bit of nasal cavity information there. And this over here, we have the side plane, sorry, the vertical plane here. It has a nice core shadow around his face, up into his forehead. So core shadow means it's the lighter value, right? It's still a shadow, but it's very subtle. And as we come down to the slower angle, lower portion of his face, the shadow will probably get a little darker. And going underneath the mouth, I already have that shadow here. In the philtrum, there's a shadow, so and so forth. I can kind of go on, but this goes down to this recipe, so to speak, over here. The first thing you do is find the proportions. Is he in thirds? Next thing you do, find the placement of the features using angles. The third thing you're doing is creating value, and value is form. Without value, there is no form. And that is a simplified version of drawing, drawing the face, actually drawing anything that's three-dimensional has to have value. So he's kind of very butch looking with a strong jaw. Let me get this over here. And then there's a little bit more value over here. So I didn't go into the details. The details are easy once you know where are you on the drawing. The details almost barely even have to put them in there. Let's just make sure we know where they belong. The only line on the face is the upper lash line. Everything else is broken lines and form. A little bit of eye information. Everybody's got to have the eyes. Okay, does anybody else have any questions? I know I'm over my time, but
It's amazing how much alive it came when you put the eyes in.
Good old eyes, right? Everybody's got to see those. A little ping light in the eyeballs. Everybody loves the ping light. And there we go. So I'm going to get rid of some of these structure lines. If I was really drawing it, I would just continue with form and value, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm going to stop there. Ooh, I can go on for another hour. Okay. Anyway, I hope it helps. You know, do visit my website, and I do teach online, and I love teaching, Asha, because it makes people happy. It really does.
We can tell. Yeah.
And your website is really well put together. It is a lot of instruction there.
Oh, good, good, good. Yeah, you know, there's nothing more. I think, you know, nothing more wonderful, because it's peaceful and alive, is the arts, right? Whether it's music or drawing, whatever. So it makes me happy to be able to do it. Okay, I think I'm done.
Thank you. It's wonderful.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Deirdre. That was
This is so totally out of my line, and it just fascinates me.
It's very fascinating. Well, it's all just practice, practice, and you know, kind of making a commitment to doing it. In the beginning, it's like everything else we do in the beginning. It's like, oh my gosh, this is like, you know, right? And then after a while, it does get easier, and I could just keep on messing with this. The other thing, as I was saying earlier, you will never get bored, ever. Okay, I'm probably going to better. I should stop. I'm over my time.
I think that just the placement is so important, that it was really good for me anyway to be able to see how you put everything there using the angles and all of the rules. That was great. That really was helpful for me.
Good. Well, thank you. I enjoyed it. As I said, it's really nice meeting people, even if it's just online. So, yep.
And I will be posting this, but give us a little while, because we're all volunteers here. So it may take a while to get up on the website, but
it shouldn't take too much, because she started right off, and I don't think I need to cut and paste a lot, so it should be okay.
It should be pretty good.
Oh, you edit too? Isn't it painful?
Oh yeah, it's the thing I don't like the most.
Yeah, I know. Hard to do. Well, anyway, thank you for inviting me.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Very good presentation.
Thank you. Okies, take care.
All right. We'll see everybody.
All right. Bye. Thank you.
You're welcome. Bye-bye.
Try.